This is That Marketing Podcast.
Made by marketers, for marketers.
Welcome to That Marketing Podcast, where today we're talking about B2B events with Amie Stankiste, Senior Director of Global Marketing for S&P Global Market Intelligence. Amie has worked in B2B marketing for over 17 years within the finance, tech, and data sectors. And as you'll hear in the podcast, she's a staunch champion of customer centricity across all marketing activity. We talked about balancing learning with entertainment at big events, how to build engagement both among attendees and amongst your internal team, and what the future might look like as virtual or hybrid events are becoming more common. Enjoy. So, Amie, thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
The first thing I think that comes up when you're planning, particularly sort of bigger event, is how do you balance sort of learning value with entertainment when you're creating an event? I know you created the S&P Essentials conference sort of from a standing start last year. How did you go about getting that balance right?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting and critical question whenever you're going into an event or organizing an event. And we always come back to the same thing, which is the customer value and the customer experience. So obviously you've got to think about and consider the type of event that you're running. So it could be anything from the kind of smaller afternoon event, which is a couple of hours, to our very large event that you referenced, which was the Essential Conference, which was a 3-day event. So that's quite a different ask for customers who are attending and what they're going to be expecting out of it. So we always go back to what the objectives really, what are those objectives for our business, what are we trying to achieve through that event, but most importantly the attendees. So what are they trying to get out of that event from the moment they sign up through that whole process, and then when they arrive on the day, what are they actually expecting to get out of it? And I think if we're all honest, content has to come first. So the learning content, the kind of exclusive access to some type of information or data or insights that those customers really want to gain to go away and take back to their normal roles, to their businesses, and to add value to their own contributions in their jobs. So really we'd start with the content, and I would say thinking through the types of speakers you're hosting at that event, the subject matter, the hot topics, making sure that you are really tailoring that type of content to the needs of those customers, depending on who is attending. And I think you've got to do that analysis beforehand to make sure you're getting the content absolutely spot on and tailored to your audience. If it's one of those larger events I was talking about, I do think it is important to balance the kind of learning and the listening intently to that incredible content with a bit more light-hearted entertainment type of activities. So that could be simple things in between the sessions as people are moving between rooms, or going from one session to another in terms of keynote or to lunch or something like that. You can then start to build in entertainment, which can be simple, people walking around the crowd and entertaining them as people are kind of eating their lunch or networking, just to try and keep that kind of interaction going and to bring people together and get them talking and kind of break the ice in some way. But it can also be bigger kind of entertainment ideas as well. So when we've had our customers together for 2 or 3 days where they're staying overnight, we've put on activities such as Segway tours in that city where the event is, because if people have traveled, they might want the opportunity to go and see the city. So tours of the city, cooking classes that really focus on the local cuisine has been sometimes fun to do. Anything with that kind of local feel that brings people together and gets people talking. I was actually part of the cooking class, I remember last year, and it was absolutely fantastic. It really got people into groups, talking to each other, naturally networking, really kind of forming a bond, so that they then had people to kind of hang out with and talk to throughout that event. And they created their own really close networks, which I know from our follow-ups that people have actually continued following that event. So not only are we providing the fun and the entertaining activities, but also we're really trying to promote that underlying networking need that people do have when they go to events. And sometimes people struggle with networking. It doesn't come naturally to everybody. So the entertainment is really facilitating some of that for people who maybe want to get involved in activity, and it breaks the ice, and it makes it just a bit more comfortable for everybody, and you go away feeling good. You've been entertained, you've met some hopefully nice people who you want to stay in contact with, and you've shared some thoughts and expertise and thinking with. So it's a win-win all round.
Do you think there's a way to encourage that sort of community building in the build up to an event? It seems like you'd have to sort of share some customer data to do that, and I don't know if that's people will be comfortable having their data shared in that way originally.
It can be quite challenging because of data privacy, and obviously that's super important, and we always make sure we adhere to any data privacy laws and really think about what people are comfortable with. One thing I've seen work quite well, actually, and we do this a lot internally with our big internal events, is setting up apps before the event. So if the event is sizable enough where there's enough information to share, you can actually bring people into an app environment where they can share ideas, and there is more of a chat function, or there is more of a polling, or people just being able to see people's profiles. There might not be actual contact details on there, so people wouldn't have to give their emails or their phone numbers publicly within the app, but at least a name, a photograph, and maybe a small bio or a job title, just so people can start to see who else is being engaged within that event. I've seen that work on webinars as well, so more on the virtual events where you can just see a sort of snapshot of the type of people who are also signed into that event. But I think the app sort of environment makes people feel a bit more it's more of a trusted environment where they feel like they can share a bit more. It's not something that's kind of being publicized out there on the internet for everybody to look at and to watch.
You touched there on internal events as well. I suppose the other side of that is getting internal buy-in, especially for events, in terms of getting enough of the company behind them to create that experience. Mm-hmm. Is there a blueprint that anyone can use, or is it just about getting your colleagues in a room and speaking to them about the event and finding a way to engage them in the build-up?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a blueprint as such, but there's certainly specific steps you can take to make the process a bit easier. Again, I think you've always got to go back to what the objective is of the specific event you're looking to run and to host, and you've really got to think about how that objective aligns to your business objectives and your business strategy. So if you're going to go and talk to senior colleagues or the management team, you've really got to understand what the business is trying to achieve overall, and then how this event or initiative would drive towards that. Also, as I said earlier, the focus on customer experience, driving customer loyalty is key, and I think that trend is making its way into boards and senior management team increasingly so. So therefore, building that customer experience lens into your sort of business case is always going to be well received. ROI is something that everybody cares about, and if they don't, then they probably shouldn't be in business. But we've really got to think about what is that return on investment going to be. But the way you position that internally needs to be slightly different. So it depends on who you're talking to and who's in the audience. So you might have a chief commercial officer, a chief revenue officer, a chief product officer. These are just some of the people who you would need to get their support and buy-in. So a chief commercial officer might be thinking really about the customer experience and driving that customer loyalty. The chief revenue officer will absolutely be wondering, well, how much will this cost, and what's going to come out of the other side in terms of revenue, short term and long term. The chief product officer might be thinking more about what's the product awareness opportunity here, and how are we going to showcase our roadmap and our overall product strategy, and how are we going to build engagement with our overall sort of product go-to-markets. So you really got to think about all those different elements. It's not just a simple, 3-point kind of argument. I think you've got to look at it from those people's perspectives and what they in their roles are trying to get out of any kind of event or an investment that's sort of going to be critical to the business. And then I think also you've got to follow up not just with what's the potential outcome or result, but also what is actually going to be needed to make it a success. So don't always just think about budget, because yes, budget is important and everybody wants to know how much something's going to cost. But also on top of cost, you really need to think about other resources. So to make an event, I think, a success, especially a large event that I've referenced, you're actually asking a lot of internal people to travel to that event, to spend a day, 2, 3 days in a location where they're dedicating their time to do a speaking slot, giving a keynote, to network with the customers, spending time away from their family. All of that, you've really got to think about the people side of it internally, and what the impact is going to be on this, the separate teams that the senior management team are responsible for. So really thinking about the kind of overarching resource need that will go into this, but also any other time commitment before the event, after the event, and really trying to give that broad perspective and that overarching strategy for the event. It is not just a 1 day or 2 day situation where it starts 9 o'clock on the Monday and finishes at 5 o'clock on the Wednesday. A large successful event takes a year to plan, and it takes all sorts of different engagement internally to be able to make it a success and to be able to deliver the standard that we want to for customers. So I think there's a few key steps there, but all of them are just as critical as each other.
Given that huge time frame that you're talking about, I think you're absolutely right to highlight the amount of building and planning that goes into the event. How flexible do you think the business events model is? We're recording this beginning of June 2020, so we've also got to talk a little bit about lockdown and COVID-19. Do you think that there's going to have to be a significant rethink of how these events work as we start to emerge from them, or do you think the model itself is pretty healthy and people will sort of snap back to normality fairly smoothly?
I think that's the big question everybody wants to be able to answer right now. And I'm seeing the shifts and the movements, but I have to say right now, if you're asking, has there been a significant shift or a significant rethink? Yes, 100%. We have 0 in-person events going on right now, so we've had to be extremely flexible and pivot our entire strategy extremely quickly. I am lucky enough to have one of the best events teams I've ever worked with. They are seriously industry leading. So they have been phenomenal in reskilling, shifting their focus from in-person to virtual. So we're really trying to make sure that the virtual experiences we're driving now are top class. In terms of in terms of the future and what that might look like, so I lead a global team, and we're already seeing shifts in different parts of the world. So in China, for instance, and talking to you in the start of June, there are already in-person events that are being organized and that are being scheduled, and people are asking to go and attend. So we're having to look at that compared to where we might be in, where I'm based in the UK, and I know many of my colleagues in the US. We're just not ready for an in-person event right now. And I think going forward, we do have to just think about this from a very human aspect, very empathetic aspect. So people come down on different sides of, how they feel about the situation. Safety, trust, all of those things really come to the fore. And as we look forward, we might be able to start to re-engage with in-person events, and I would love that to be the case, because I'm definitely a person who gets energy from being around people and that socializing and the networking side of business. So I really hope we can get to that, and I do believe we will. However, it will be a phased and a staged type of approach, and I think what we've got to do is stay very close to our customer base and really take their opinions very, very seriously, ask them questions, ask their opinions, really try and take the temperature of the groups of people that we're trying to engage with, because that's how we should be led in our decision making. So an example at the moment is we were meant to be putting on a conference later in the year in the States, and what we've done is we know we have some quite loyal attendees that do tend to to come every year. So we're thinking, right, well, we'll try and do a focus group with our most loyal people, because they're the most likely to want to come in person, I would have thought, the people who really love coming to the same event. So we're going to put focus groups together and really try and understand the sort of qualitative, how people are feeling about these things, but then also, surveys. I think we're all about to go into a world of surveys. I have to say that is one of my predictions.
Yes.
We're all being asked for our opinions left, right and center, whether it's, going back to the office or attending events or any other kind of experiences that companies are trying to drive. So it really is about that customer opinion, what they really want to do, and then how based on that feedback, we need to make decisions, but make sure that we're providing the value that you would expect from any of these types of experiences. So it's a long answer. It's not a concise answer, so yes, no answer, but we'll see where we are, I guess, in a few months or years' time.
As we're starting to emerge from lockdown, and as you said, or different bits of the world, some events are starting to come back online. I think a huge part of it is going to be the trust that customers have in your brand. How have you been able to maintain that, and how do you build it going forward, do you think?
Yeah, I think trust is front and center at the moment, and we're really thinking about this from lots of different perspectives. I mean, as people, we know we want to do business with people that we trust. So human interactions and human relationships and customer relationships are being almost, disrupted at the moment, given everything that's going on. And so finding a way to build those relationships back up, and especially a kind of trust-based relationship, is so important. So trying to bring the human aspect of your brand to the fore is super important. So at the moment, that could be challenging, but that could be around the speakers, or like I say, just making sure that there's some kind of interactivity in your event experiences, so people can just get a sense of who your people are and what they stand for. And I have to say, for S&P Global Market Intelligence, our people are front and center. We have a really strong people first culture. So we really do want to bring that to the fore, because our feedback time and time again after we host events is that people are one of our key differentiators, and our customers have amazing feedback on our people. So I think that's first and foremost. In terms of information and data that people can trust, that is again more important than ever. We are all reading and consuming so much more than we ever have, I think, and almost being bombarded by that. So again, it's being able to cut through the noise and maybe rely on certain sources, as you sort of asked me before about what do you rely on to get that information expertise. You've really got to think about what your value proposition is, and how it really speaks to the sort of trusted offering that you have, and why customers should be really coming to you and thinking about working with you over and above maybe any of your competitors. People again want to feel safe, so it's a slightly different, it's a different nuance, but safe and trust I think are quite closely linked. So if we do start to go back to the in-person events, people do want to feel safe. They want to trust your company and the venue and where they're walking into, that all the measures have been followed, that they know what they're getting into, and that everything is delivered as expected, and that they go through that experience enjoying it and not having to worry. So I do feel that kind of safety and trust. We do have a responsibility as event hosting companies or venues to really provide that environment of safety. And I think people just want to make good decisions at the moment. And we've been talking a lot about making decisions and how do you make decisions. And so really that is all based on trust. Whatever, whichever sort of decision you're trying to make, you have to try and trust what you're reading, who you're talking to, the data you're ingesting, whatever that might be. It all comes back to trust. So as we go forward, it's so important, and we've all got to make sure we have a responsibility to deliver to people's expectations so they can trust us.
Insofar as it's possible to be sort of thinking of the future on a slightly longer term, do you have a quick tip for event marketers for the next 3 to 6 months?
I would say my quick tip is probably as relevant in the future as it is right now, which is around agility. So just be ready to change, be ready to learn. I think as marketers and event professionals, we're all pretty agile, and that's what we're sort of built into our daily lives and how we do our jobs generally. But we need more than ever to be ready to learn, ready to adapt. We've got to jump on new experiences, throw ourselves into the unknown, but always thinking about what customers are needing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is about having an open mind going forward and looking at things rather than having a concrete plan that we're going to try and put in place to say, how can we, let's think about how we can adapt, and then we can change the plan going forward. I mean, Botler were very lucky that our big annual customer conference happened at the beginning of February. I don't think coronavirus was really on the public radar. I don't particularly remember it being on there. And then so we've got up until February to have the scheduled event. We haven't decided to move it as yet. But you're right. I think I'm intrigued by the possibility of a blended event where you have maybe some part of your audience visiting in person, then live streaming the rest. I think there's a lot of possibilities of how you manage that. I suppose my concern there, at the risk of not being empathetic, is how do you persuade people to invest the money to come across to the real one if they can get the content online, or do you go fully online for a year and see if that gets the engagement and then move it back? I think there's a lot of, like you said, I think there's a lot of question marks. There's no quick short answers to any of this.
Yeah, we've been having that conversation about the sort of hybrid model of virtual and in-person, and it is very clear that to get somebody to an in-person event, especially for the foreseeable future, only if it's safe, of course, is absolutely what that added value is of going to the event in person versus dialing in virtually or being hosted online. We've looked at different models where could we have the speakers together, so there's the more natural rapport between a panelists, or that type of environment where we could get them into a studio to have that, but then have the audience all virtual. We've also thought about, could we have a sort of VIP side of things where there's certain customers that are invited to the in-person side of things that make it extra special. So it might be some of the sort of more entertainment side of things that I've been talking about, or a speaker being there that isn't actually streamed online, but it is the big draw. It might be somebody who's extremely kind of in demand in the industry, or somebody who's going to have some really exclusive kind of insights. So we're still looking at it, and certainly haven't made any of those decisions yet, because again, then you've got to weigh up, is it right to give people different experiences based on whether they want to travel or not? So I'm sure we'll all get there, but the industry is talking endlessly about this, and like I say, I've got the best events team who are absolutely keeping their finger on the pulse in all different regions around the world, and really just helping to guide our decisions day by day at the moment. To be honest, it really is sort of that short-termist in terms of what we've got to make decisions on.
Absolutely. And if people are trying to get involved and take part in those kind of discussions that are happening across the industry, where are the best places to get started if you're starting to think about how this is going to affect your events probably for 2021 now, really, if we're honest?
Yeah, well, I think there's sort of two areas that I've been talking to the events team about a lot, and they've really thrown themselves into different networks. So there have been a lot of virtual networks set up, unsurprisingly, with events professionals. I don't have the exact names of them here, but I would say anybody who's looking into events right now or trying to make these decisions, there are a lot of these forums around and online. So they're forums that are made up of events professionals, people who work at venues, who are trying, they're trying to get back into hosting events within their own buildings. So they're online as well, trying to figure this out. So there's sort of these forums where you've got different groups of people coming together who all have similar but slightly nuanced levels of expertise around events, and they can all bring their thoughts, their experiences to the table and learn from each other. And I think that's been absolutely invaluable. I would say outside of just being in these sort of forums and talking to each other, it's also about attending other people's events online at the moment. So, there's some of these very large conferences that have shifted online pretty quickly. And I've attended a few of these where I'm certainly not going to name any names, but the quality, some are extremely high quality and some, sort of less so. So you can learn from attending as well. I wouldn't say you would learn from the decisions in terms of in person from those, but you can definitely learn about providing that heightened level of customer experience from attending them yourself.
Okay, yeah, like you said, I won't push you to name any names, but what's been something that stood out for you as a really effective thing that's come from an event you've been to or virtually been to, if you like?
Yeah, I think it's thinking about that accessibility and not expecting people to sit in a room on one screen going to an event for 3 days. It just doesn't work, and people have screen fatigue and sitting down fatigue and listening fatigue, I think, at the moment. So there's quite a lot of fatigue out there. You've got to somehow build the event around the different, if you think about the different sections of the event that you would normally have had, and then try and recreate that environment virtually, which is tough. But what you can do is offer the opportunity for people to dip in and out of these things. So if you were going to have a sort of keynote session and then breakout sessions, the keynote session could be the sort of main draw as you enter the event. So that's where you really, you do attract people, and that's getting people off on a really strong start in terms of the engagement levels. Then you might have the different breakouts, and I think now even more than ever, it's really important to tailor that content so that you're really drawing people into what's interesting to them right now. So that might mean you've done your analysis beforehand. Again, you've done your research beforehand, finding out what people are really caring about, what they're thinking about, what's top of mind, and really tailoring those sort of breakout sessions and different kind of experiences that are online to their needs, to what they've said they want out of these things. So I think when you go in to these sort of virtual platforms as well, you want to feel like you're in a conference or an event type space, but you've got to be quite clever in how you recreate that. So I think you've got to break it up into sections, give people the chance to dip in and out as much as you can, build in interactivity and engagement. So whether it's, consistently asking, sort of polling, really understanding how the attendees can talk to each other if there is that functionality, and just thinking about all the different levels of experience that you would get at a normal in-person event. How do you actually recreate that virtually, and can you? So we'll just think about those different areas. That's where I've seen it done particularly well.
Absolutely. One thing I saw, BBC One, Radio 1's big weekend, they actually produced lanyards, wristbands, and access passes that you could buy even though all the content was streamed online.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how that works, if especially in a sort of B2B context, is that just a gimmick, or would that kind of thing actually work with our audience? I can sort of imagine our particular Spotlight audience going for it quite well, but I don't know if it would work necessarily for everyone's events.
Yeah, I think it could, and again, you just need to think about your audience and what you could add to that event to make it a heightened level of engagement or entertainment or fun or whatever you're trying to achieve. We have been researching and thinking about, client gifting, so using sort of online portals that if people attend a certain event, they can log in to a portal, put their details in, and they get sent a special gift, and it's nothing too high value. We're not sending a new car or anything, but just the sort of things that people would expect to get when you go to a conference. It's a lot of sort of the branded giveaways and that type of thing, but really trying to tailor it to the current situation. So for instance, our client gifts that we're looking at providing would be things like a wellness box or a stay-at-home box or an entertainment box that have got, whether it's little games or workout gear or a water bottle, things like that. So it's trying to be really mindful of the situation people are in and how the gift hopefully would make people feel good and feel a little bit special, but also is kind of useful and tailored and not tone deaf. So it's kind of, it feels like it's right for this time as well.
That's quite a nice look back to where we started getting the content learning and entertainment right. You have to get that right as ways you can get that right from a from a follow-up perspective as well. Brilliant. Let's flip the question over and say, is there any, where for these companies that have pivoted to big events, what sort of things have you seen where you've gone, oh no, that's not working, that we could learn from in the other way?
Well, yeah, I have been to, and this is on a personal level, this isn't maybe on a business level, but I was meant to be similar to the reference you made about the BBC Big Weekend. I was meant to be attending a festival, and the organizers it seemed very kind. They tried to take that online, but it was a live streaming of some of the music, obviously, but they had everybody online so everybody could see each other, and it was just basically people sat in their living room. So it was a weird combination of kind of people listening to music like Gogglebox, do you know what I mean? So it's like people
Yeah.
sort of sat in their kitchens or in their gardens. Some people were dancing around a bit, but it was just sort of watching people in their own environment, maybe just having their own conversations, but to music, which I wouldn't say was, one of the best experiences. Whereas I've seen it differently, where you can actually see the band or see the DJ, and that actually works a bit better with the full setup. That's much, much more engaging experience, but that's very much from a kind of a personal level. In terms of other pitfalls, I would say that thinking that online virtual is an easy option is a big pitfall. And I think that comes more from business stakeholders, where we just think, let's make everything into a virtual event because it's easy. We'll just do it tomorrow because it's easy. That is not the case at all. Even if you're going virtual, we're thinking in-person events in the future or virtual events now, you still need an immense amount of planning, time, thinking about all the different aspects that go into making an event great. And as we all know, events are super detail oriented, and if you don't get every single detail right, then it can just seem terrible. It can just bring the entire level of experience completely down if one of those details hasn't been completely covered. So I would also say just working with stakeholders to understand that virtual is again not easy because of the practice that it might take, or the technology investment that you might need to make, because to run one of these conferences that I've been talking about, which are the larger scale conferences, you do actually need a pretty advanced platform to be able to do that on. So I wouldn't ever underestimate the level of investment that you might need into those virtual platforms as well. Just because it's virtual doesn't mean it's free or it's cheap. So I think that's one of the pitfalls that I've seen kind of businesses looking at as well. And then I would say just not thinking about customer experience first and foremost. So another area that I've seen people jump to, because the virtual events are seen as fairly easy, it's kind of, oh, let's just do this for the, it's like for this, and it might be something that's very product focused or very internal, what we call it inside out. So it's kind of what we want to achieve as a business, let's just do it because it's easy and we'll put it on a virtual platform or whatever. And it's really not thinking about what the customer is actually wanting, what that customer experience is, and just trying to kind of force feed people information through virtual channels, which nobody wants. And I think, if we're all honest, there's so much going on virtually at the moment. There's quite a lot of noise out there. So to stand out from the crowd and to cut through that noise, you've really got to provide something that's sort of industry beating and that provides something exclusive. I think you've always got to think just from that customer aspect, which is, how are you going to get people to a virtual event, and what is that customer experience? So is it going to give me, as an attendee, is it going to give me exclusive access to something that I'm not going to be able to get elsewhere? Is it going to provide some level of entertainment that I can take away and feel good about? Or is it going to be something that helps me, that trains me, that gives me information that's going to make my job easier and better? So can I make better decisions as a result of going to this as well? So sort of different levels of value that I think people take away from this, and if you don't put those things front and center, you're sort of doomed to fail, I think.
I think that's quite a nice point to wrap up on, that when you go online, all the things about customer experience and value provision don't actually change, and it's still an investment. So take your time to think about it. I think that's a good point to wrap up on. So once again, thank you very much for being on. We'll leave it there.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of That Marketing Podcast. You clearly have wonderful taste. We hope you found the content useful and enjoyed it. We'd love you to subscribe wherever it is you're listening to us. Maybe leave us a review. If you can think of a topic that you'd like us to cover, or even if you fancy coming on the podcast and sharing your own experience on a particular topic, you can reach us at marketingteam@spotler.co.uk. Thanks once again, and happy marketing.